We are recording now, so let me just repeat the title. This is Understanding Supported Decision Making and Alternatives to Guardianship. If you are on a phone that you might have some background noise, we ask you to mute it. But if you want to unmute, you can ask a question when we open it up. You can also, if you're online with us at join.me/AJEParents, you can also see the chat bubble at the very top. It looks like a little text bubble, and you can send a chat to me, and I will ask your question or put your question in the queue. And this is just a conversation. It will be recorded now that I've pressed the button, and we will put it on our website so you can come back and listen to this. As I said, this is designed to take the wide and varied subjects around special education and make them a little bit more bite-sized. And the one we're taking on today may seem really scary to a lot of parents and maybe even something they don't want to think about, but I'm really happy to be joined by a terrific advocate and a terrific professional and person in our DC community, Morgan Whitlatch, who is the legal director at Quality Trust. And she's a real expert in this topic around supported decision making. And I think you'll find that when you listen to it as a parent, you'll realize that there is something that you need to do, and Morgan provides a lot of resources to be able to do it. So to start off, Morgan, welcome, and I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about Quality Trust for people who don't know about it, what they do and what you do there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Molly. So Quality Trust is an independent nonprofit advocacy organization that's been advancing the interests of people with developmental disabilities in DC since our founding in 2001. And we monitor the quality of services that are being provided and also advocate for whatever changes are needed to help improve the lives of people with disabilities. So we work a lot with transition-age youth with developmental disabilities and their families in exploring what you recognized as a scary topic when students are turning 18 and looking to what their adulthood is going to look like. And that's why I'm so excited to be able to be part of this project. I'm an attorney at Quality Trust, and we also have lay advocates. So sometimes people don't need to have an attorney. They need to have somebody to help lift up their voices and be heard within the system. And so we have lay advocates that work with families as well.
So, we were using this term, supported decision making, and I'm going to cheat a little because I kind of know a little bit about this already. But, let's say you have a child with a disability, and it could be, I'm assuming anything from learning disability to developmental disability to a physical impairment, any of that. And what does supported decision making mean, and why should I even care as a parent?
Well, there's a formal definition of supported decision-making I can share, but I prefer to do it in practical terms. So on the first of my slides, there's a definition that is used for supported decision-making. And I raise this in this context because a very similar definition of supported decision-making was recently adopted by the DC Office of State Superintendent of Education. And so it is relevant to this discussion, and it's why this conversation is so timely. But supported decision-making is an alternative to guardianship where people with disabilities are using their support networks, the people around them, to be able to ask questions, to understand choices that they're facing, and then make their own decisions. Okay, so that's kind of the more technical definition of what supported decision-making is. They can ask questions, they can get concepts translated into words that they understand. That's what supported decision-making is, and it's particularly relevant for youth who are approaching adulthood, and when they turn 18 in the District of Columbia, they're presumed to be able to make their own decisions. And that's, sometimes schools call that the transfer of rights. So families might get transfer of rights notices and not know what that means. And that's really what it means. So supported decision-making is a way youth can be able to use their support networks around them to be able to learn about the decisions that they have to make and then make their decisions. Now, from a practical perspective, supported decision-making really is just what we all do every day. So when we face a difficult kind of choice, whether or not we have a disability, we ask friends for help in translating kind of complicated words and phrases. So if I have to make a healthcare decision, I call my sister. She's a doctor. She knows me well, but it's really about the fact that she knows my quirks. She knows I'm a little bit of a hypochondriac. She can help me translate the words into ways I understand, and she knows how how things are going to affect my decision-making. So the supported decision-making is human decision-making, but the reason why we give it this special kind of word is sometimes when people with disabilities need some help with making decisions and ask for that kind of help, they are assumed not to be able to make any decisions themselves. And so we want to coin this phrase to kind of say, hold up, let's use supported to see if supported decision-making is going to work in this kind of situation. And so if you look at the continuum of decision-making supports, which is what you have here, you can see where supported decision-making fits in this. Now, I've ordered this list from least restrictive, the person making their decisions, all the way down to the most restrictive, having a guardian. And you see where supported decision-making fits in there. It's I would argue, the first level of support you should look to if someone needs to have some kind of decision-making support. But too often, for youth with disabilities, particularly those that are cognitive in nature, people fall right to the bottom. Okay, they think guardianship is the answer. We get a lot of calls from parents saying that schools told them to go get guardianship. And none of these other less restrictive options that don't involve the court system, that don't involve removing or reassigning rights, have even been explored in a meaningful way with them. So I think that's another
Can I see? Is there somebody on the phone that might have some background music? Could we? Not yet. You don't put us on hold, folks. Just put on mute. Okay, thank you.
So that's what supported decision-making is. And I think I want to encourage families when they're thinking about that time where a child is turning 18 and they think that there's some decision-making support that student needs in making educational decisions, to think through this continuum carefully and explore whether less restrictive alternatives will work before immediately assuming they have to go to court to get guardianship.
So, that's the thing that people think, okay, so my loaded question is, I have a, 17-year-old with autism, and it's considered a developmental disability. And I have had this fear because sometimes the schools say, well, once he's turned 18, he's a legal adult, and he's supposed to be doing his IEP by himself, or I can't necessarily be there, or a doctor's appointment. And so I think that's where I have heard people say, well, you have to get guardianship so you can go to the doctor's appointment or be part of the IEP. So can you address that a little bit? Because I feel like there's a lot of people that I still hear that from in D.C.
And I do too. I hear that a lot, and that's misinformation, okay? There are many ways to support people in the school context, for example, if we just take the school context, that don't involve guardianship. So first of all, under regulation, parents continue to get notices, should be getting notices of IEP meetings, even after their child turns 18. Their child can also invite the parent to be part of the IEP team meeting, and we have encouraged students to do that, to say that if they continue to want that kind of support, they can invite whoever they want to the IEP meeting, including their parents. And if the school won't share information, they can sign release forms that allow the school to share information. And I think you can see in slide 8 and slide 7, you can see some forms that the Office of State Superintendent of Education, as well as DC Public Schools, have developed that allow for that sharing of information with family members. And these are forms that students can knowingly and voluntarily sign that say, these are the supporters I want to be in my life. These are the people I want to get confidential information about from me. So it is a myth that the only option for parents to continue to be involved in the decision-making of young people and of young adults is that they have to get guardianship. They can use these other kinds of mechanisms to continue to be invited to IEP team meetings, to continue to be part of the decision-making process of the student, and to encourage the student to get some experience and practice making decisions. So I think that I frequently hear that.
Yeah.
I frequently hear that, but you also... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Molly.
I was going to say two things that I just really want to repeat, because I think it's so important if parents are listening. Is one, you have to advocate. Do not let a school or anyone else tell you that you have to do guardianship to be part of the student's IEP and health related. There's other forms. So you have to speak up. And then second, that you need as a parent to also be talking about this with your child, even if they have a significant cognitive that you don't think they may understand this. You can start talking to them about who do they want in their lives to help them make decisions even after they're 18. Is that correct? Is that a good way
Molly,
to put it?
that's an excellent point. There are other mechanisms, and I just want to briefly address healthcare. Healthcare, who hasn't heard of HIPAA release forms? Release forms that allow the doctor to continue to share information with somebody. That can be a very good mechanism to get the information flowing so that parents can continue to be involved in the healthcare-related decisions of young people. Another method in the hospital is, let's always remember a law that's been around for 26 years, and it's called the Americans with Disabilities Act. The doctors are required to provide reasonable accommodations for people's disability, and that can include, I would argue, allowing parents to be in the room with the student, providing time for the young adults to be able to weigh options, to have supporters with them, and to engage in supported decision making. So I agree with you, Molly. It takes advocacy, but it's so important in building the skill sets of young people.
And talk to me, and maybe I'm jumping around, and you tell me, I've got the slide up with the DCPS form, but what if guardianship also sounds pretty formal? Like you have to go to court in DC to have it done, and I'm assuming to take it away? There are lots of
myths about guardianship. I think people think of guardianship as just getting a piece of paper, but it's not. Families have to go to court to formally petition. In DC, it would be the DC Superior Court, and the judge has to believe, one, that has to find the person lacks capacity, but two, a guardianship is truly necessary. And so that means you should have to have explored all of these alternatives first, and they are not working before you think about having guardianship. It's a formal process where the court's removing the person's rights and assigning those rights to a guardian. And there will be a court hearing. I get a lot of calls from parents saying, I'm the guardian of the person with a disability who's an adult, and it turns out they've never been to court, so I know that they're not the guardian. There is a lot of accountability guardians have, too, with the court, is that it's really inviting the court into your life. So guardians have to regularly, every 6 months, file a report with the court, or they could be removed as the guardian. They have to be able to, the guardianships are formally reviewed every 3 years to determine if they're still necessary. So social workers come out and investigate. So sometimes guardianship is the answer for families. However, I think that families should get the information about what guardianship truly means, that it's more than getting a piece of paper. It's a court process that's removing certain rights, and it's going to mean ongoing court oversight. And I feel like families aren't always told what all of these options are.
Wow. And so let's get back to, again, hoping that we'll be listening to, having parents listen to this and talk to this. So if they have a child with a disability, at what age do you think that they should really be kind of thinking about this? And I know we should all be planning for our child's future and talking, but when do you feel like a good time to kind of start? And maybe a couple of, basic questions or things for a family to think about.
Absolutely. So we always advocate for supported decision-making to happen as soon as possible. I think where it really comes into play or families start thinking about it is when they get that transfer of rights notice, but ideally it would be far sooner, because you want to be using, I think, your IEP to help build important decision-making skills for students. So we always advise that there be a goal surrounding decision-making for families that are incorporated into the IEP that gives students the opportunity to practice making choices, to practice having control over their lives, to maybe build the skills needed to run their own IEP team meeting. And so we've had a number of recommendations where we say that why don't you incorporate self-determination principles, which basically means students being able to act for themselves or being encouraged to accept responsibility for certain pieces of their lives into the actual IEP. And we understand DC Public Schools has started a project to start it even in pre-K to kind of teach the idea of self-advocacy to students who have disabilities. So that's one of the recommendations for families.
Yeah, and I just want to interrupt real quick because we've been talking DCPS, and I just want to confirm, so we've got it on record, that this is both DCPS and public charter. So, right?
Yes, I'm focusing on DCPS. Yes, I'm focusing on DCPS because they've been doing supported decision making for longer. However, this is applicable with the new regulations that were issued in July of 2016. Supported decision making is the law across DCPS schools, across charter schools. It is incorporated into the law. And I've put into my slides some citations that you can see what I'm talking about. It started with special education reform legislation that incorporated the idea of supported decision making. But DCPS had already issued, by that time, transfer of rights guidance that incorporated that content of supported decision-making, and then regulations have now been issued by OSSI that apply to all DCPS and charter schools to implement supported decision-making.
Great. So we definitely, and I'm sharing those screens right now so everybody has those. And again, you can always go back to our recordings to see these so that you have it. I just want to make sure that everybody knew this is across the city, no matter what kind of school your child is going to. Yeah. And then, if we wanted to do supported decision-making or say this is the way to go, what would be the first steps beyond, just starting to talk to our child about who you want in their lives and maybe even involve siblings or cousins or anybody else that might be, part of it. But what would be the first steps as far as, working with the school? What should we be doing there?
I think that in working with the schools, the first thing you want to do is, for students that are not yet 18, who cannot sign a supported decision-making form, you want to have conversations about that one of the skill sets that should be supported in advancing the education of your child is decision-making skills. So talking to them about what are the opportunities that they have to be able to be making decisions during their day, making it a formal goal and objective. I think the other thing we all need to do as advocates, and parents are perhaps the strongest advocates in this case, is really push the school to make IEP meetings student friendly. I've had lots of sad cases where students are turning 18 and they've never been invited to their IEP meeting before. And so they're very intimidated. They don't want to go to a meeting where they only talk about everything bad they do during the day. They want to be, and so we need to push back to include students in that decision-making process early so that they're able to be familiar with the process and not be intimidated by it. I also think that it's really important to try to have these conversations not just when you're talking about the transfer of rights at 18. So I think these need to start early. And I think that there are important ways when students turn 18 to further advance these kinds of concepts by using the idea of a student-led IEP meeting supported by the parents so that the student really is center of the decision-making process, and to recognize that schools should not shut out parents in this process. Parents remain part of the support network of the student. And so I've had certain kinds of situations where the student's written a letter to the school saying, I don't want to make any decisions without my parents present, so that because I think a lot of parents are concerned that they'll be entirely cut out of the process and the school will convince the child to sign out of certain services. So there are ways to document this throughout that to put the school on notice that no decisions are valid without a parent involvement.
So definitely something a parent could do is just say to their IEP team, I really want to start talking about this. And we talk about student-led IEPs, and I want to just stop because that might be really foreign concept to people and students being involved in their IEPs. I think for a lot of people, they think they're trying to be protective and they don't want to have their child involved. And just as an aside, I certainly thought, well, I know how to make these decisions and I'm making them and I'm the parent, and it doesn't necessarily mean, what my child may want. I know what their education may be good. But one way that I started early, and for parents who may be nervous about this, is just making sure that your child comes to the IEP. And if they don't want to stay long, my IEP meetings last 2 hours sometime, and that's too long for some of my kids when they're younger. But what we did with my youngest, who is kind of who has autism and was really not wanting to come, is she came and she introduced the people in the school who work with her to me. And of course, I knew them, but she had to say in her own words what her speech therapist does and who this person was, and then just start the I just started the conversation saying, we're here to talk about your education, and there's actually a piece of paper that designs your education. And so that was, I felt like for me, that was a really great first step with a child who really didn't want to be there and didn't want to be involved.
And I think so too, Molly. I mean, when a student-led IEP team meeting is a big bite for somebody to take, and so introducing certain kinds of concepts, even having like a time where the student gets to say what some of their goals are, or I love the idea of introducing her team members and how they fit into her life. I love the idea of explaining what an IEP really is to a student, and then if they want to leave, they can leave. I think that you will also see that IEP teams operate very differently when people with disabilities are actually there, when the youth is actually there. And so it's a very different kind of tenor. So I think your approach is excellent. It can serve as a good model.
Yeah, and I think for parents, too, is allowing everybody to take, one of the things that we're doing, and I want to give a plug for something in a minute, is understanding that parents may feel like, oh, boy, I really missed the mark here. I should have been talking in kindergarten, as you mentioned. But, my child's 17.
Never too late. Never too late.
There's never too late, and you can always start, and it's baby steps. Like if your child has never been in the IEP meeting before, they're probably not going to lead it at the next one. But they can maybe bring some, and if they're nonverbal, they can bring pictures of what they like to do or different pieces. And I want to give a plug, and Morgan will be there. I think she's on our schedule, but Quality Trust and AJE are co-hosting a parent session at the upcoming School Talks Voices of Change Transition Conference. And we're going to be talking a lot about these topics about transition and what's life after school. And we are definitely doing a supported decision-making module there. But if anybody wants information for it, you just need to go to AJE or Quality Trust and give us a ring, and we'll let you know. But that's coming up on March 10th, because it's definitely, I think you'll agree, Morgan, a majority of parents of kids with disabilities in the city don't know how important it is to be thinking about transition and life after school.
I think that's absolutely right. And yes, I will be at the transition fair, and I'm looking forward to it because we'll be able to delve a little deeper into some of these subjects. I just want to make a plug for this on the slide that you have up here, the Supported Decision Making How slide. We just posted this parent's guide. The link is cited there that really talks about how you can work and brainstorm with your child about supported decision making in the different realms of their lives. So yes, it talks about education, but it also talks about healthcare. It talks about finances. And it's designed to be a very user-friendly with some great tools for parents to start thinking about these kinds of ideas. And so it kind of gives you a little bit of a how-to, because supported decision-making isn't just a process. There's not one way to do it. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's really going to depend upon the family and the person themselves as to what their needs are. And so it really encourages people to identify those unique aspects of supported decision-making and how it could work.
And I think that's something that we're all talking about, especially in D.C., and this webinar is for folks in D.C., is that maybe the citywide supports or the agency supports are not going to be very plentiful in the future, and that we really, for our students and young adults and newly out of school folks with disabilities, they are going to need to rely on their personal networks and personal folks, and getting these people involved in these kinds of who makes the decision when that young adult is hurt or needs support is really important.
I absolutely agree.
I probably have skipped around, Morgan. Is there anything on the other slides that you want to go to before we get off of this, the great resources?
I think not necessarily in terms of slides. I think they're good resources for people to be able to think through the continuum. I just want to encourage people to have high expectations for students with disabilities, and really understand that capacity is not this black and white, all or nothing kind of concept, that guardianship isn't needed just because someone has an IQ level of whatever or just has a diagnosis of whatever. There's more that's needed in order for guardianship to be appropriate. And so exploring the continuum of support and the different alternatives that would be available to them is that we're here. Quality Trust is here to help you do that. We regularly counsel families on this very topic because I know that transition time can be a scary time. It's exciting, but it can be a scary time too, and we're here to support families and students with disabilities.
Well, and I think that's a really big plus to, Quality Trust. One of the things that we wanted to do with these webinars and conversations is also to make people aware of the local resources that they have right here. And I know Quality Trust is doing that. And I will also say even for parents who may have started thinking about this like me at least, 2 years ago, I've made my own appointment with Morgan to talk specifically about my oldest who's turning 18. So I think it's a great resource, and whether you go to Quality Trust or you talk to someone else, it's important to talk to someone about this and think it through, because it's a lot of questions and a lot of possibilities depending on the individual of your child.
Absolutely.
Okay, terrific. I have not seen any questions. I'm going to just put that call out to anyone on the phone and the people watching. If you have questions, if you want to say them now or put it in through the chat, I'm happy to read them out. So I'm going to give us 30 seconds of silence to give you a chance to speak up if you want to. Okay, I think we've got it. So again, if you are joining late, I know a couple of people popped in, we will have this posted on our website within the next day or so, and so you can listen from the beginning. And Morgan, it's always a pleasure. I always learn something new from your wealth of knowledge in this topic.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This has been a great conversation.
Terrific. Thanks, everybody.